When colonial powers swept across the Americas and Africa, many powerful civilizations crumbled in less than 3 years, some even within months. When Cortés captured Montezuma, the Aztec emperor, the Aztec Empire unraveled quickly. The Inca Empire in South America, despite its vastness, fell apart when Pizarro captured and killed Atahualpa, the Inca emperor, in 1532. In Africa, tribes fell swiftly. In places like Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, British colonial powers used a system of indirect rule by co-opting local chiefs to act as colonial intermediaries. They bought them off with gifts, promise of protection or false promises, turning them into puppets for enforcing colonial orders on their own people. This allowed the British to control vast populations with minimal troops. They knew that once they had the chief, they had the whole tribe. The reason for the fall of all these tribes and empires that had been built over centuries was not because of the strength of the Europeans, but rather because of the weakness of the people's systems. Mayans, Incas, Aztecs, and various African tribes' governance and leadership systems consisted of one man as chief who controlled the whole tribe or the whole empire. So the colonizers knew that once they capture, kill, or buy that one guy, the whole empire or tribe would collapse. The strategy was foolproof. Capture the chief, control the people. Where people had strong tribal loyalties to one person at the top and centralized hierarchical systems, colonization was easier and even cost-effective. The colonizers executed the strategy with precision and with excellent outcomes. However, there is one group that they were not able to completely destroy. In fact, this group of people defied foreign domination for over 3 centuries, confounding Spanish, Mexican, and American military forces. They were the Apaches. The Apaches were, still are, a group of culturally related Native American tribes that traditionally lived in the southwestern United States, primarily in present-day Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and northern Mexico. They were not a unified nation, but a collection of independent bands or clans, and each band was autonomous, making decisions based on local circumstances. They utilized a concept called the Nantan. It was a system where people were spread all over the territory without one central leadership structure or one leader. Their leadership structure was situational. A Nantan leader was chosen by consensus, not by birth or hierarchy. Nantans were not kings or chiefs in the traditional sense. They held influence, not authority. In peace, they advised and mediated. In war, they led based on proven courage and skill. Whatever situation was present, whoever had influence and respect on a particular issue at that point became the leader. Some famous Nantans were Geronimo, a respected Nantan who led resistance against the US and Mexican armies for decades. Cochise, a Nantan who led resistance in Arizona, formed alliances and outmaneuvered US forces with guerrilla tactics. And Victorio, a skilled strategist who led a long campaign of resistance until his death in 1880. Why were the Apache so hard to defeat? 1. There was no centralized leader to capture. Unlike the Aztecs, Incas, and African chieftains, who had one guy at the top of a rigid hierarchy, the Apache had multiple independent bands, each with its own Nantan. If one was killed or captured, others rose in his place, and the system would continue to grow. The system was Hydra-like. Cut one head, and more would emerge. A Hydra was a legendary multi-headed, serpent-like monster in Greek mythology, which was engaged in battle with Hercules. It was incredibly hard to kill because every time one head was cut off, 2 more would grow back in its place. Therefore, killing or capturing one Nantan did not collapse the movement. Others emerged to replace him, and the system would still continue growing. 2nd, situational and voluntary leadership. Apache leadership was not hereditary. Nantans led by consensus and per situation, especially during conflict or crisis. Each band of a Nantan was autonomous, making decisions based on local circumstances. This meant there was no throne to usurp, no chain of command to sever, and no palace to invade. 3. Mobility and guerrilla tactics. Apache bands were nomadic or semi-nomadic, making them difficult to locate or trap. They moved constantly and utilized guerrilla tactics instead of full-scale battles, ambushes, hit-and-run raids, and blending into difficult terrain. Their deep knowledge of the deserts, mountains, and canyons gave them a tactical edge. 4. Flexible band structure. Apache bands could split, merge, and relocate as needed. This fluidity made it impossible for invaders to predict or target a core base of operations. Unlike fortified cities that could be besieged, the Apache had no central capital. ஐந்தாவது, cultural and spiritual resilience. Their resistance was not just military, it was cultural and spiritual. Apache warriors drew strength from ancestral traditions, visions, and the communal memory of resistance. The Apache's decentralized system of leadership made them almost impossible to conquer through conventional colonial strategies. They showed that resistance and resilience isn't always about strength, but about structure. Their way of life, spread across bands, governed by consensus and rooted in flexibility, made them one of the most enduring symbols of indigenous resistance in history. Their decentralized model of leadership is studied today in military strategy, political science, and in organizations. One timeless lesson we can learn from the Apaches is that when communities are built around one node of power, they are always vulnerable. And have we not seen this phenomena across the church landscape too? In many churches, the entire identity, vision, and authority rests on one individual, the man of God. While I'm not trying to disparage what we have in many centers today as they serve their purpose, I'm highlighting a core vulnerability we need to be aware of. I'm sure you've heard of the term, the devil targets the leader. Well, tell that to the Apaches, and they wouldn't know what you're talking about. The vulnerability comes when that leader dies, falls morally, leaves or misses God's movement. The community loses direction, often collapsing or splintering. Sadly, we see this same vulnerability that doomed ancient empires and African chieftaincies, plaguing modern churches and movements today. However, we see this Hydra-like resilience was found in the book of Acts. When the people were scattered by persecution, they spread the gospel further. The movement never diminished or died. On the contrary, it thrived and grew. Actually, the apostles remained in Jerusalem while everybody else scattered and spread the message of the kingdom wherever they went, and the kingdom increased exponentially. Acts 8:1-4. My final thought is that a church that equips many to lead becomes unstoppable. What if we reimagined leadership, not as control, but as catalytic influence? What if the future church looked more like a band of Apache warriors than an empire being run by a king? A movement isn't defined just by one person. Someone I know said that a movement is the result of the groundswell created when ordinary people take ownership of an objective for which they are overwhelmingly convicted, while partnering with each other to give velocity to that objective. If this message sparked something in you, share this video, subscribe for more historical wisdom for modern times, and let's build resilient communities together.